So let's focus on the curriculum then. So the curriculum is telling us, as you know, that we are aiming for all of our learners to become ambitious, capable, enterprising and creative contributors, ethical and informed citizens, and healthy, confident individuals. So that's our aim of our curriculum for Wales. And we are now, as we design our science and technology curriculum, are looking through the lens of science and technology and using science and technology as an enabler to help and assist our learners to become those learners, to really encapsulate those 4 purposes in our learners. And that's as they move through the continuum. So at no point at a certain point in that science technology curriculum are we going to tick off and say, yes, today we have taught them light and sound, for example, and they have become an ambitious, capable learner. They are really on a journey, and throughout their education, they are aiming by the time that they have left their time in education to be those 4 things, to encompass those 4 encompassing purposeful things. So our science and technology curriculum are enabling our learners to achieve those 4 purposes. And that's what we need to bear in mind throughout the whole of the time we are designing our curriculum. Now then, as we design our curriculum, we are on a journey to that reform of our curriculum. And I'm sure as many of you have already designed curriculums within your school for many of the AOLEs, you would have already been on this journey before. So there's an engagement phase where you're looking at that curriculum for Wales guidance, looking at your school vision, looking at your priorities, professional learning, and really understanding the framework. And then you're moving on then to designing, planning, and trialing your curriculum. So today for you, you're in that phase of engagement where you're engaging with the curriculum for Wales guidance for science and technology. You're going to be thinking about what are your priorities for you in your school, for your learners and your staff when it comes to science and technology, what is right for them. And then you're going to move into that middle part of that phase where you're beginning to design and trial your planned curriculum. Deb, I can see you've got your hand up there. Would you like to ask a question? Sorry, Deb, you're on mute.
Sorry, I've pressed that by mistake. I apologise.
No problem at all. That's okay. So today we're going to be looking and focusing on that designing and that planning of your curriculum. And then when you've planned your science and technology curriculum, what you're then going to do is take it away with your staff and trial it in your school, and then reflect upon it during the first teaching of that science and technology teaching. When you're teaching it, you're going to review it, and there may be that you will need to make amendments to it along the way. So it's not going to be, finished in one chunk. It's constantly going to be reflected upon, changes made, and that is absolutely fine. That's the process that we're going through with our designing our curriculum. But just to let you know that you are on a journey and it takes time, and that's absolutely fine. So then, what do we mean by a curriculum? So the Curriculum for Wales guidance explicitly says to us that a curriculum is everything a learner experiences in pursuit of those 4 purposes. It is not simply what we teach, but it's how we teach it, and crucially, why we teach it. So when we're looking at that through the lens of science and technology, first of all, we need to be thinking about the why. Why are we teaching what we're teaching. So the 4 purposes are the reason why we're teaching it. Does everybody in your school have that shared understanding of why you're doing what you're doing? Does everybody have that shared vision for science and technology? Is everybody in school buying into your vision? So that's really important. When you've designed your curriculum, you've got your vision in mind. You know exactly why you've developed it in the way that you are, and that everybody is on board with that vision. So everybody has that buy-in. And then, how do you intend to teach it? So what methods will you use? How will you complement and reinforce the learning within each discipline of science and technology? And how are you going to sequence the learning? So how will you raise the science, the DT, the computer science capital for each pupil in front of you? And then essentially, what are the science and technology needs of your learners in your school? So what are you teaching them is really important to suit your learners, okay? And the way that you deliver that range of knowledge and skills is really important because that comes down to the experiences that you provide for them. Now, we will look later in the session of where you get your knowledge and your skills from. And there are places that together we can draw upon that knowledge and those skills to reinforce the what and the how. But the experiences are really personal to you, to your learners in your school, because that's what's really going to make it a local curriculum. It's really what's going to personalize it for your learners, because what you have in your school will be very different to a school that might just be, a next street away from you. Okay, your learners will be very different to learners in other schools, so you need to be thinking about the range of learners that you have in front of you, the groups of learners, the cultures that they come from, the communities. You need to be thinking about the communities and the agencies you have in your communities that can support and raise the profile of science and technology in your school, and linking those together with your science and technology teaching to really raise the profile of it. So when we're talking about what, thinking about experiences are really personal to your own school. So then the science and technology curriculum in Wales, the rationale behind it is to really give our learners a holistic approach. It really focuses on inquiry. So the statement of what matters one is focusing on scientific inquiry. So that's scientific thinking skills, but also design thinking skills. So that inquiry is very much embedded throughout all of the disciplines of science and technology. How are our learners going to problem solve, critically think, analyze, collect data across each discipline of science, technology, and computer science? It's all about engaging those learners. So it's thinking about real world experiences. How are you going to promote curiosity? How are you going to foster that awe and wonder for the world around them? How are you going to um, really exploit their creativity and again, those problem solving skills? And real world connections. Our science and technology curriculum is to really exploit the opportunities for them to realise that science and technology is all around us and it impacts on people every day. And the designers, the scientists, the innovators, the computer scientists have had an impact on people's lives all across the world, across diverse communities, and communities really close to us at home. And we need to make that connection to our learners, and they need to see their place within science and technology and how they can actually make a difference to people and the real world around them. Also, it talks about that active learning. So it's promoting active hands-on experiments. So there's a lot of practical learning that is going to happen through our AOLE. And through that, there is going to be lots of collaborative learning. So there's going to be lots of teamwork, there's going to be lots of paid work, there should be encouragement of collaboration, of thinking, hands-on communication, interaction throughout all the disciplines of our AOLE. And then to encapsulate all of that and to promote the active learning and collaboration, the skills are going to come through that to enhance the knowledge of each discipline and to really enhance how you can link the disciplinary skills within the AOLE together to problem solve and critically analyse when they are going to design, evaluate, create solutions. So looking at how digital technology can support their design thinking, looking at how digital technology can help them to solve an investigation, for example, to collect results. Their digital skills, their cross-curricular literacy skills, and their cross-curricular numeracy skills all need to come through our AOLE authentically to help them to realise how they can use those skills naturally to solve their problems. And then the key ideas are really based around progression throughout the AOLE. So the AOLE is focused on key themes within science, DT, and computer science, and within that inquiry approach. And it focuses on each learner and how that learning progresses through those themes, building upon prior knowledge and skills over time. So really thinking about how you develop your learner's knowledge, revisit that knowledge to deepen that knowledge and widen the breadth of that knowledge that they have. So it's okay to revisit certain themes as long as you are deepening that understanding all the time. The scientific inquiry. So, are you developing strong foundation skills in scientific inquiry that includes observation, experimentation, data analysis, and again, that progression in their skills. So, our learners becoming more sophisticated and independent as they develop those skills, as they move through your school. There's a focus on the curriculum and you look at the guidance and you look at the terminology in the guidance on a design thinking approach. So are your learners able to apply design thinking principles to solve problems and create innovative solutions? So can they really apply things like market research to their design strategies? Can they problem solve? Can they evaluate their designs and tweak their prototypes based on their evaluative outcomes? And again, technology is really prominent throughout our AOLE. So are you talking about and exploiting those opportunities for learners to look at technology, think about the ethical values of technology and how technology impacts on society? And are you giving them opportunities to use different types of equipment, like robotic equipment, equipment where they can code and develop a sophistication in those skills as well? So developing scientific thinking then, this is where we are developing our scientific inquiry approach. So statement of what matters when within the science and technology AOLE. This is where scientific thinking is really focused, but this thread is going to run through each of the other statements of what matters. So scientific thinking is focused on the skills and processes. So can your learners question? Can they formulate their own questions? Can they ask why? Can they ask how things happen? Can they then make predictions? Can they observe? Can they observe over time? Can that sustained time that they observe become longer? Can they collect data and can they interpret that data? And then can they think critically with those processes that they're doing? So are they able to evaluate the evidence that they collect? And are they able to become more independent to draw their own conclusions? And as they're doing those two things, they are going to become problem solvers. So they should have those opportunities to solve problems. Are they given investigations? Are they given in times to create and come up with their own questions that they're allowed to investigate, to solve their own problems, to create their own informed decisions? And then we have design and technology, which is statement of what matters to in our AOLE, which is a discipline now that is focused on design and technology, which is really focused upon how the learner is encouraged to design and create solutions. And when we're talking about designing and creating solutions, we are talking not just about construction, we're talking about food and nutrition, and also about textiles. So it's having that breadth of the design and the making across your learning experiences as well. And when they're doing that, are they given opportunities to work together, to collaborate on their designs? And again, that links back to real world experiences where you can say, well, within design organizations, teams work together to work on design pieces, to draw upon each other's ideas, to become better designers and create solutions together. So you're going to encourage that so they can test their designs together. And by doing that, again, we're bringing problem solving into DT. So they're going to use their problem solving skills to identify challenges that they can come up with a solution for. And then they need to evaluate what they have found a solution for. So it's testing their solutions, coming up with a conclusion to see if it has met the needs of that user. So you can see running through these themes, we're having collaboration, we're having problem solving, thinking about how we're planning, how we're testing, and how we're making an informed decision. So there are threads that are running through our AOLE. And then what's quite new to us within primary schools is statement of what matters 6. So statement of what matters 6 is our computation in our world statement of what matters. And this discipline is focused on computer science. So computer science within the science and technology AOLE is focused on teaching our learners how computers work. So how computers take in information and how computers use that information to then create an output. So it's all about how that computer works. So for that, you need to be teaching the learners all about computational thinking because that's teaching them how a computer breaks down problems into smaller steps by using algorithms. So the algorithm is what goes into the computer and then teaching them that the computer is using that algorithm to solve a problem and that's what comes out of the computer. And that algorithm development is what we refer to as coding. So the learners will be able to develop their knowledge of algorithms by having opportunities to complete coding tasks. And there's various ways that they can do that. They can write code on paper, what we called unplugged learning, and then they can use different software, things like the microbit and things like Scratch, where they can do plugged coding, so they are writing code on a computer. So this is very different to our DCF, cross-curricular digital skills, where the learners are just focused on how a computer works and how it takes code to digest information to create an outcome. So I'm going to pause there for a second because that is what our science and technology curriculum, our AOLE, is all about. There are discipline areas. We have science, computer science, DT, and we have inquiry, which runs through those three disciplines. We've talked about the rationale and the purpose behind our AOLE, which is to develop those problem-solving skills and to exploit the opportunities to develop progression across the different disciplines, collaboration, thinking about real world experiences. So before I move on any further, I just want to open up the room for any questions if you want to clarify anything further. Okay then. So we're going to move now into session 2. And this is where we're looking at our statements of what matters. And this is where we're going to use these statements of what matters to design our purpose-led curriculum. So this is really when we get into the meat of what we're doing today. So our statements of what matters in science and technology are mandatory. So that means you must use the statements of what matters to design your curriculum. That is basically your curriculum. The statements of what matters is telling you what you need to teach. Now, the statements of what matters is an explanation of the meaningful context for learning. They provide the key conceptual triggers for your curriculum. So you need to be linking your ideas, your big ideas, your knowledge, your skills, and your experiences for what your learners are going to learn and explore through these statements of what matters. Now, the structure of these, they're organized around overarching headings, and they give specific learning points, like I said, knowledge and skills. And they focus on transferable skills, again, that development of critical thinking skills and problem solving skills. And it's really about how we are going to use them to guide us to develop our concepts, so we can use those concepts to break down lesson plans that we can assess our learner progress. Now then, these statements of what matter are very high level. So we've got to look at how we can use these now to help us to inform our purpose-led curriculum. So we need to be thinking about understanding them and breaking them down. So there are our mandatory statements of what matter. There are 5 statements of what matter that are discipline specific. So we have, starting from statements of what matters 2, we have D&T. Then statement of what matters 3, when we read that, that is telling us that is more biology specific. Statement of what matters 4 is based around chemistry matter. Statement of what matters 5 is concerned with physics knowledge. And then statement of what matters 6 is regarding computer science. Statement of what matters 1 is inquiry. So all of the knowledge, the skills in there and your experiences are concerned with investigating, testing, problem solving, how they are going to use their critical thinking skills. Now, what's interesting when we will look at these statements of what matters in detail, and when you look at them, you will see that the statement of what matters 1 is explicit in what it says about inquiry and those investigating skills that they need to have. But then when you begin to look at the other statements of what matters, you will see that statement of what matters 1 is weaved throughout each of the other statements of what matters. So what that means is you are going to have to design a curriculum that has inquiry, so investigating and testing in each of D&T, biology, chemistry, physics, and computer science. And that's really important because that's mandatory. That is what the law is requiring you to do. And now to help us to do that, we need to decide on some concepts because the statements of what matters, like I said, they are overarching big ideas, and we need to use those big ideas to break down concepts that we can draw upon, that we can use for our knowledge, skills, and experiences, that we can plan for ideas progressively over time. So, for example, here on the screen, you can see there is a column called science. So for science, a concept could be forces and motion. Another concept could be light and sound, or electricity and magnetism, earth and space. And you can see that they are quite broad statements. The same for DT in column 2. Such concepts could be design for sustainability, or digital design and fabrication, or product design and development, or materials and technology. And in column 3 for computer science, such concepts could be computational thinking, data representation, algorithms and programming, or networking and communication. Now, when you look at those as statements, you can see they're very broad. And when you begin to think, well, what would I then teach within those concepts? There is a huge amount of knowledge and skills that you could teach within each of those concepts. And that's purposely being created like that, because if you don't have a broad overarching concept and you have smaller, narrower concepts, it will be very difficult for you to fit in all of the knowledge and skills and experiences that you need to fit into your curriculum. So it's advisable that you have big ideas that we refer to as concepts. So then you can draw upon those big ideas to fit in the knowledge, skills, and experiences that you need to from different statements of what matter, and you can revisit those statements of what matter at different points in the continuum. So, for example, forces and motion, you might teach that in progression step 1, and then you would revisit that in progression step 3, and it would be in progression step 3 you would teach different knowledge and skills based on that concept that's really going to deepen and broaden that learner's understanding of the knowledge of forces and motion. Now, what I'm going to do now is just to give you an example of how you can do that. So when you're choosing your concepts from the statements of what matter, you need to be thinking about, first of all, well, what's relevant to the learners in our school? What's relevant to their lives? And what's relevant to the community in which we teach? But also, what's relevant in the wider world, because it's important for them to know science and technology impacts on the whole world around them. So relevance is key on 3 different levels: to them personally, to them in their community, and to them in the wider world. Also, you've got to think of concepts that is going to spark their awe and wonder. So you really want them to be engaged in their learning, something that's going to spark their curiosity. You want them to be interested because you want them to be coming up with those ideas to problem solve. And you want them to be motivated to keep problem solving and be critically and analysing what they're doing. Also, like I said, those concepts need to be broad because you need to deepen that learning. So you need to revisit it at different times, and you've got to be able to explore it at depth and broaden that understanding so that that learning progressively becomes more sophisticated. Um, and they need to be able to make connections across those disciplines. So, like I said, that statement of what matters when is weaved throughout all of the disciplines. So, you're going to think about how you can make connections within each discipline. It will really enhance the learning for the learner because they can see those connections. They can see how the knowledge within science actually is going to help me find a solution for something of a product that I'm designing in D&T. But also for you then as a teacher, it's going to enable you to deliver the curriculum more manageable because you're delivering it more holistically. Now then, how do we do it? That's probably the part that you all want to know. How do we actually create those concepts from the statement of what matters? So on the screen here, you can see that I've got statement of what matters 2. So the overarching title is there in bold. Design thinking and engineering offer technical and creative ways to meet society's needs and wants. So that tells us that this statement of what matters is referring to design and technology. So this is specifically about that discipline of designing, making and evaluating our products. So I'll give you time to read that statement, and it's in that statement that we're looking for key terminology that we can pull out that we think is relevant to our learners, that we think is relevant for the world that we live in, for learners to know, that we can pick out those big ideas that can help us to create a concept. So I'm just going to give you a minute to read the statement. Okay, now my example, if I'm designing for my learners, I've looked at this and I've read it and I've decided the keywords that I feel are relevant to my learners are design, solutions, a user-centered design process. So first of all, it's DT. So I want them to design something. So that's why design is important to me. If they're designing something, they're coming up with a solution. They're trying to solve a problem. They're designing for a purpose. User-centered is important because who are they designing for? Well, I want them to design for someone. You know, it needs to have a user in mind because that user is what's going to make it real to them. It's bringing that real world scenario into the learning for them. I also want them to be creative. It's important for me that they know that risks are involved and sometimes things can be difficult that they need to overcome. So those minimizing complexities are where they go into problem solves. But I need to teach them about the risks involved with using tools. So that's why I've picked out that terminology there. Engineering products. So I want them to make products. I want them to make something. So I've pulled out those keywords there. Again, users. So I've just picked out users to remind me that I want them to focus on that user all the time. Engineering has come up again, so I want them to make something. Response to needs and wants. Again, that comes back to the user. So are they designing for a specific purpose? Are they making for the user? Are they finding solutions for the user? And problem solvers. So here, all I've done is highlighted keywords that are important to me. So that statement of what matter is mandatory. That's what I've got to teach from. And now I've picked out some keywords there that are going to help me decide, right, how am I going to create a big idea using those keywords that are going to help me create a concept to teach from. So where do I go next? I've got my big ideas. I've got my ideas from my statement of what matter. So what I did then was I put all of those words from that statement of what matter together on a page and looked at them. And I thought, how can I group these together? What do they look like? What do they mean to me? So I've thought with time and thought, how do they go together? So then I thought, right, first of all, design. Design, they are the first thing in DT I want them to do is I want them to create something. I want them to design something. And when they're designing, they're creating a solution. So immediately I thought those two go together. And of course, they're designing for somebody, for that user. And the process that they're going through is designing and finding a solution for that user. So I've put those two together, those three together. And by designing, finding solutions, they are being creative. So again, I felt that those went together. Users in mind all the time. So I've grouped them together. While they're doing that, they need to be thinking about the risks involved. So when they're designing, they need to be thinking about any risks that they might encounter. They need to be thinking about the materials that they've got and the equipment that they've got to use. Is it available to them? And if it isn't, well, how are they going to overcome that and redesign their product? So I've put that together as well. And of course, they're designing to solve a problem. So they're coming up with ideas for either somebody's needs or to design something that somebody wants. And that means that they are problem solvers. So you can see there, I've got ideas grouped together. And then I thought, well, solutions, if they're having solutions, maybe that sits with something else. And I thought, well, engineering products means they're making something. And if they're making something, they're also creating a solution. So engineering products and solutions do sit together. So I've grouped them together in a different colour too. And again, by doing that, they are still focusing on the user and mitigating risks and those complexities. Engineering all the time, they're making that product again. Now they're being creative in that process. And by being creative, they are responding to needs and wants. So how are they doing that? And how are they being problem solvers? So I had 3 different groups here. And then I thought, with my 3 different groups, can I give them a name? Can I come up with a big idea for these different groups? So I sat and I looked at them and I thought hard, what do they actually mean to me? And what would my learners be doing if they were focused on these processes, these skills, the knowledge that was encompassed in these items? And first of all, with those items that I had grouped in blue, I thought all of those are focused on designing skills, the knowledge around designing. So for that, I call that designing. And then those that I've grouped in orange, I thought all those engineering skills, when they're mitigating their risks, when they're engineering and focusing on the user, they are actually making a product and using skills and knowledge that comes into the making process. But there were still items that I felt I hadn't really encompassed and they still needed to think about. So in purple there, problem solving, needs and wants, and creativity, I thought, well, that really still needs to be focused on as a theme of its own. So if they've designed and they've made, are they evaluating what they've done? So are they thinking about, through their designing and their making, have they responded to the needs and wants of that learner? Have they evaluated how creative they've been? And have they looked at the problem they've had? And when they're evaluating on that problem, have they come up with a solution? So with those keywords that I pulled out of my statement of what matter, grouping them into 3 groups there, coming up with those headers of designing, making and evaluating. Those headers now become my concept. So for D&T, for statement of what matters to, I've got 3 concepts for me in my school. My concepts are going to be designing, making and evaluating. So later on, I will then look and explore at what knowledge and skills will feed into the concept of designing, making and evaluating. But at the moment, I know what my big ideas are, what I need to teach. I need to teach designing, I need to teach making, and I need to teach the evaluating process in DT. Okay, so the principles of progression are really, the purpose of them is to improve the learning. So we're not looking at proving that learning. We're not looking at setting, a tick sheet against any of these. It really is principles that you can use to know how are your learners making progress in their science and their technology. So the way that you can use these are to read the principles of progression. I've put a link directly in the team for you. And together with your science and technology team back at school or your senior leadership team is together to evaluate where you feel you are currently with these and how you feel that you can use your current expertise and your practice within these principles of progression to use them to ensure that your learners are making progress. And how is that understanding of the principles of progression shared across the school? So really, when we're looking at progression, we're looking at developing the knowledge, the skills and the experience, like I said, within science and technology. And we're looking at those principles of progression over progression steps. So we're looking at progression step 1. For us in primary schools, we're looking at around progression step 3, possibly dipping into progression step 4. But starting in progression step 1, you're really going to be focusing on the foundational, basic, fundamental concepts and experiences. So really hands-on exploration, learning through play, lots and lots of observation, simple design and simple coding activities. Then as the learners progress into progression step 2, you're going to build upon those foundational skills to develop that knowledge further by introducing slightly more complex concepts and developing the skills of inquiry. So they are beginning to ask their own questions in more detail. They're going to start to use their design thinking skills with independence, and they are going to be problem solving with using their critical thinking skills. And then when they're in progression step 3, they're really going to deepen that understanding of their scientific thinking by applying that to their inquiry skills. So they can ask their own questions, they can investigate questions posed to them through different contexts and scenarios. They can link learning from different statements of what matters. So can they link their learning from science to DT, for example? They can understand the process of computational thinking. So really becoming specialised in the knowledge of this area, becoming more sophisticated and being able to give reasons for their understanding. And then if you have learners that are working within progression step 4, it's about exploiting those opportunities to really give them deeper opportunities to explore their chosen areas of investigation. Again, opportunities for them to apply their knowledge in real world situations so they can really advance their skills. The big question is then, you've got your concepts, so where do you get those knowledge, skills and experiences from? We've touched upon experiences are very personalised for your local setting, but where do you get the knowledge and skills from? Now, this is where the Curriculum for Wales guidance of descriptions of learning are very useful. Now, the descriptions of learning are statutory. They're not mandatory, which means they are there for you as a guide. It means that you're not teaching against them. You're not assessing against them because they are just simply guidance tools to support you as teachers and leaders of science and technology. So the descriptions of learning, they are there for each statement of what matter. They are set out over 5 steps, so progression step 1 to 5, which broadly act around ages 5, 8, 11, 14 and 16. And those descriptions are to be sustained over a series of years. So like I said, you're looking at those progression steps, and it is knowledge that learners are going to revisit and deepen that understanding over a series of years. And the descriptions of learning are allowing you to select content that will give you breadth and depth in your curriculum. So again, how are you revisiting it? So learners are broadening their awareness of the scientific content, really deepening their understanding of the knowledge and applying their skills with more maturity and independence. So your descriptions of learners learning is what's going to outline the progression across the continuum, and they reference points for that pace of progression. But like I said, this can difference from learner to learner. So not every one of your learners in your class, as I'm sure you will know, will all be working at the same progression step. So we can use these descriptions of learning to take the knowledge and skills to develop our purpose-led curriculum. Now on the screen there, you can see a screenshot of the descriptions of learning, which have been taken from Statement of What Matters 3, which is focusing on the biology statement. I've captured it for progression step 1 to 3, and I appreciate that you can't read the descriptions themselves because they're so small. But what I've done is imagine I've decided that my concept is living things. And then I've looked at the descriptions of learning to help me decide what knowledge am I going to put in for my concept of living things at each progression step. So I've looked at those descriptions of learning and I've pulled out what of those descriptions are telling me things about living things. So in progression step 1, it says, I can recognise that plants and animals are living things which grow. That relates to living things, so I've highlighted that as a piece of knowledge in red. Then in progression step 2, you can see it's not linear, so it doesn't go straight across. The description of learning that matches up with that one in progression step 2 to progression step 1 is actually the last description in that column, and it says I can explore relationships between living things, their habitats and their life cycles. So again, I've got a piece of information there that I can use to develop knowledge from for my concept of living things. And then for progression step 3, there are 2 descriptions that give me knowledge on living things that I can use to put into my concept for living things. Now, also in the statements of what matters descriptions of learning, You will also see I've highlighted in blue inquiry skills. So just like I said to you earlier, the statement of what matters 1 is weaved throughout each of the other statements of what matters, and that becomes a bit more explicit when you look at the descriptions of learning. So here in progression step 1, in blue, I've highlighted, I can identify, follow, and begin to create sequences and patterns in everyday activity. Well, that's a skill, and when we begin to think about that, that's allowing those learners to look at observations. Can they pick out patterns from things that they're seeing? Can they talk about sequences that they're seeing? So that's a skill that they can do. So that would link back to inquiry. So here I can have inquiry, which could be observation of living things. Then again, in progression step 2, there are 2 descriptions there that would link to inquiry. So I've highlighted those. But you can see in progression step 3, there are no descriptions that link to inquiry. But that said, if I'm going to create an effective, purposeful science and technology curriculum, my learners in progression step 3 will have to do inquiry-based learning around living things, if that's my concept, because we know that this curriculum is all about that problem solving, that collaboration, that critical thinking, that inquiry. So this is where I can link now in progression step 3, my statement of what matters 3, to a concept in statement of what matters 1 to ensure that I've got inquiry into my living things. Okay, so this is how you can use the descriptions of learning to get your knowledge, your skills, and linking statements of what matters together to build up your knowledge and skills for your curriculum concepts. When it comes to your experiences, I would say decide upon what knowledge and skills you're teaching. And when you have done that, then decide, and that can be done as a team, what experiences can we offer our learners that are really going to enhance the knowledge and the skills that we're teaching? So it could be you could have the local dentist coming in if you're teaching about teeth. If you've got a pond on your school site and you're learning about living things, you would be doing lots of inquiry-based learning in your pond in your school site. So when you know what the content of your curriculum is, that's when you're going to enhance it with your experiences. There is no set rule on the number of experiences that you need. It's all about what you feel is manageable and what you know that will authentically really enhance the knowledge and the skills of your curriculum. Really important, and this is a principle of progression, is to provide breadth. So when you're looking at your concept and you're developing your knowledge and your skills across those progression steps, you've got to be thinking about the knowledge that you are developing, and you've got to be giving them a range of contexts. So they're revisiting that knowledge through a different lens, through a different context each time. So you may do that through topics or themes. You could be doing that through one-off activities. And again, you could be making links across different areas. So for example, if you were doing food and nutrition in DT, you could be linking that to health and well-being and looking at the healthy plate and healthy balanced lifestyles in the health and well-being AOLE. So it's a bit, once you've designed your science and technology purpose-led curriculum, it's about thinking how can we purposely link this to other AOLEs. So we've got that holistic approach that's joined up and coherent and is really manageable for us to deliver. And by doing that, then you're really providing depth for your learners. You're giving them that time to reinforce that knowledge, to reflect on it, to have that deeper thinking. The inquiries that you provide for them will give them lots and lots of discussion where they can really pull upon the knowledge that they know, discuss it, and then draw upon new knowledge. So it's really important that you are thinking about how you're providing for breadth and depth at different progression steps along your progression maps. And by doing that, your curriculum is going to be cyclical because you're revisiting that knowledge all the time. And by revisiting that knowledge, your learners are going to have that new discovery that we hope is going to give them that engagement and that awe and wonder all the time. So the descriptions of learning there is just some questions for you to think about. It's just how you're going to use them to think about what you're going to teach and why you're going to teach it. When you know what you're going to teach, that's when you should be thinking about how are you going to teach it. And again, what does that progression look like across each progression step? So how are you revisiting it? What's the breadth and what's the depth like?